Hello, this is Mike Van Meter. Welcome to the Recovery is Possible podcast. I want to thank you for joining me, and you can reach us at our Facebook site, which is also called Recovery is Possible, and our website, which is vanmeterwellnesssolutions.com. This podcast exists to educate the public about addiction, remove the stigma associated with addiction, and offer help and support to those suffering from addiction. And today, I have a special guest for you, and that's Jim M. And Jim and I go back, oh my goodness, I don't know how many years now I've known you. I've certainly known you as long as I've been in recovery. And Jim has been a great inspiration to me, and just a source of knowledge, as you'll see here. Jim is the kind of guy that when you go to a 12-step meeting, he's got all the one-liners, he's got all the quips, he can quote all the pages. He knows. He's like that guy in the room that you look to, that if you got a question, Jim's probably got about 50 answers. And he really is just a walking encyclopedia of recovery, and he's been fantastic. And while I was down teaching, many of you know I've talked about in the podcast before, I taught at the FBI Academy about addiction, and Jim actually was a guest speaker down there on a number of occasions. So he's been a great friend, and just a confidant. He's been somebody that I've been able to rely on. And that's what you need in recovery. You do need to have people that you can talk to and rely on and share things with. And so with that, Jim is a Vietnam vet. Jim is also a former police officer, actually was in the same department I was in, only Jim was there earlier. And he's also the survivor of sexual abuse, and he's going to be talking about that as well. And so with that, Jim, thank you for joining us today.
Michael, thank you for having me. My name is Jim, and my sobriety date is May 16th, 1979. And again, thank you, Michael, for this opportunity to share a little bit about what happened to me and what it's like now. Again, if anybody's listening to this and you're thinking about recovery, and you really want to give it a try, you have nothing else to lose. Trust me. My last drink was May 16th, 1979. And prior to that, I was 31 years old. I was on the police department in D.C. I was working as a child abuse investigator for about 7 years, and I transferred back into uniform. And that was the beginning of my bottom. I drank for a total of 7.5 years. I didn't drink or use drugs in Vietnam. I never got into drugs. Alcohol was my drug of choice, and it did everything it was supposed to do. I had fun. And then the way I describe it is alcohol did for me, and then it started to do to me, if anybody can relate to that. I experienced the blackouts. I also have a strong genetic predisposition in my family. Every male in my family was an alcoholic, and my father died of alcoholism, and I believe that my grandfather died of this disease also. And there's a joke in 12-step recovery rooms that say, well, we can take the Irish Catholics out of recovery meetings and have meetings in a phone booth. And I love that. I think that's the greatest thing in the world. But I'm not going to bash the church. I'm not doing any of that. It's just my opinion and what has allowed me to live this wonderful life of gratitude. And I am blessed beyond my wildest dream. My last drink, again, like I said, I was suicidal. I had called in saying within an 8-hour period sick in the same tour of duty. The third time I called in sick, 3 sergeants had to come down and break in I was thrown out of my house. My wife had thrown me out. And what happened was they had to break the door in to get me. I drank about a half a gallon of vodka and nothing happened. I couldn't get drunk, I couldn't get sober, and I couldn't stop drinking. And for me, that was the beginning of what I refer to and what I've heard other people refer to as the gift of desperation. They put me in the back of a police car that I was driving 3 nights before. They didn't know what to do with me. They took me to the VA hospital. They didn't have any beds. I was decorated in Vietnam. They didn't have any beds. They took me to Washington Hospital Center, which was like the big hospital in D.C. No beds there. And they took me to Providence Hospital, 12th and Barnum Street, Northeast. And I was admitted, and my BAC was .38. I was 260 pounds, and I was 31 years old. And the nurse came down. They took me up to the detox room, and I had DTs. I knew what DTs were, but DTs only happened to alcoholics that were on the street, standing in front of the burn barrel, drinking Mad Dog 2020, the only wine the grape was never touched. That was my idea of an alcoholic. But in withdrawal, I experienced DTs. There was a helicopter landed on my windowsill in detox, and the nurse gave me this button that you push. And I pushed it, and I said to her, there's a helicopter just landed on my windowsill. She said, okay, wait here, sir. So she came in with the doc. Now, keep in mind that when you're in detox and in withdrawal, the needle was 6 feet long, and it had an opening like a muffler. And I later found that it was Dilantin for seizures and Librium to calm me down. I came to about, I guess, 2 or 3 days later, and the DTs were gone, the shakes were gone, and I haven't had them since because I haven't found it necessary to take a drink of alcohol. They told me after I stayed in there 23 days, I got discharged. This is the first time in my life, I think, that I ever followed any directions. And in the beginning, they told me that there are two classes of people and 2 occupations that are hard to get sober and stay sober: doctors and cops. I thought, who do you call when you're in trouble? Doctor or a cop? Made sense.
I can tell
me.
you that's the absolute truth too, by the way.
Sure. Made sense to me. And they told me, and trust me, I still have the gift of desperation. Even though I was on the pink cloud for a while, I went to 12-step meetings. I got a home group. I got a sponsor, what they suggested. And you'll love this. I got sober in my home group in the scout car beat that I worked when I worked in uniform. I remember my first meeting, my first 12-step meeting. I walk in and I locked up 3 of the guys sitting on the wall for drinking in public. And I looked at one guy. He looked at me as if to say, "Hey, we've been waiting for you." And funny now, they wasn't funny then. No. So I sit down. By this time, I've gotten a sponsor, and I've asked the man to be my sponsor. And I'm sitting next to him, and in walks the Bishop of Washington. And I'm thinking to myself, man, this guy's got the ring and the collar. And I thought, wow. So I leaned over to my sponsor. I said, "Hey, John, what do you think these people think of me?" He said, "None of your goddamn business." Excuse me for the profanity, but that was the word. And I said to myself, really? I guess I'm not that important. And he said, yeah. He said, "What they think of you is none of your business." But that man, the man that I locked up, became a wonderful friend. Actually, he spoke at my 10th anniversary. And I just, in chapter 2 in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, they talk about we are people who normally would not mix. Boy, isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
Oh, I got a service position. I made coffee. For the first time in my life, I thought, I don't have to drink today. And I was free. I was alcohol free. And that was, I guess I was about a year sober. I went to meetings, and I got it. The way they explained to me the 12-step recovery program was, now, I don't want to get too cosmic here with some people, but they said, it's like breakfast. I said, what do you mean like breakfast? They said, it's like ham and eggs. The pig's committed and the chicken's involved. And I thought, are you kidding me? So, and the old timer said to me, are you committed or involved? Because some of these guys were WW2 vets, Korean War vets. And, here I am, I'm 31 years old. I'm thinking, what are these old timers going to tell me? And we got to talking about combat and things like that. And it's just, I felt at home. But I never talked about my sex abuse until I was I guess I was over 10 years sober. And it started to come back to me, the night sweats. And by this time, I had sponsored a Roman Catholic priest, and he'd never gotten sober. He died drunk. I believe that he had the secret too. I think he was a pedophile, but it never came up, and it wasn't necessary. And then, I began, at this time, the church began that problem. I'm from Philly. So the Philadelphia grand jury started, and they were having people come up, and I happened to see it in the paper. So I called my sponsor. I said, hey, John. He knew I was a sex abuse survivor. It's the first man I ever shared it with. I kept that secret for 30 years. I said I would never tell anyone except my first sponsor, John P., who's been dead. He's been dead about 10 years. I had him for over 32 years as my sponsor. And I said, I think I'd like to ride up to Philly and just go before a grand jury and clear this secret up. And I did. And he said to me, Jimmy, look, when you go before the grand jury, you're not there to impress or depress. You're there to express. And
I love that one.
Sense. So when I went in, so I went up before the grand jury, and here I was. By this time I had retired from the police department, and I'm talking to the cops, the affiliate DA investigators. I'm talking to the cops. One of the cops I went to high school with. Now, is that odd or God, right? So I'm sitting there. He said it was. He gave the priest name, and I said, yeah. He told me the nickname. He said they used to call him Happy Harry. I said, are you kidding me? So I'm before the odd or God, I'm telling you. So I go before the grand jury. I went to the bathroom and I said the Serenity Prayer. I'm sitting on the toilet. I'm saying, please God, don't let me get in there and lie. And my sponsor said to me, Jim, don't cash the check yet. And I went up there. I said, look, when I told the truth, this is what happened to me. And I looked up and I listen, I've been before 100 panels of grand jury on my police career, but I never went up there as a witness. I always went up to testify. And I was scared. I was nervous because I'm talking about me. And I'm talking about the secret that I had for 30 years. And I will tell you that when I left there, I said a prayer and I said, thank you, God. You give me the strength to do this. And I'm not a religious man by any stretch of the imagination. So I get in my car and I look up at William Penn in Philadelphia. I looked up at William Penn and I said, thank you. I am done. The secret is out. And believe me, Michael, I was so free, not only from alcohol, but the program had given me the strength to go up there and talk about me and to tell my story. And I was amazed, and I was free.
That's amazing.
I drove home. And Michael, I got to tell you, it was like I was reborn. And I came back and I shared it from the podium at a meeting, and I can't tell you how many people came up to me afterward and said, can you talk to me? I said, my life is an open book. Here's what happened, and here's what you might want to do. But I had to get help, and the churches continued to pay for everything. And that was 10 years sober. And then what happened was I found out that my daughter was sexually abused by my ex-wife's husband's son.
Oh, no.
And that was the toughest time in recovery. I didn't drink. I didn't drug. I got her help. And I owe that to my recovery, because I knew what not to do. I knew not to go over and beat the shit out. Beat the crap out of her. I knew that, and I knew that I could go to jail sober too. So I talked about it, and I just, again, each day I got freer and freer, and then I went up to Pennsylvania to tell the Senate and the Congress up in Harrisburg my story, and again helping people, and just that was me, because I'm free. My life is an open book. I am free today. And people say, well, how come you still go to 12-step recovery meetings? And you know what I tell them? The big book doesn't have pictures. And it's a snarky answer, but you got to get a sponsor. You can't do this alone. I'll share a story with you. My sponsor, over 32 years, died. He had dementia, and God, I love the man. I missed him dearly. So I was 6 months without a sponsor. And I'm sitting here one night thinking, I've got so many sponsees. I've worked this, I've worked that. I've got service. I've done this, I've done that. And the first word and the first step is we. And I came up, there was a problem with some financial stuff. And I thought, I better ask a man to be my sponsor. And I called a guy, Jim. He said, Jim, I'd love to. And I said, thank you, Mike. We can do this. And it was like I was a newcomer. And I needed that at that time. And I was over 20 years sober and got remarried to a woman, not in AA, but works in the mental health field. Just a wonderful support. I've got 4 grandchildren that have never seen me drink. My daughter was 5 when I got sober. She's now 46 and a nurse. Michael, if you're new and you're listening to me, give this thing a chance. If you're struggling, if you think you drink too much, you probably do. If you have blackouts like me, or brownouts, or grayouts, where you have a period of time you can't remember, and I know that this isolation, quarantine stuff has got to be murder on people that are drinking. It's got to be, because I know myself. I know where I would be and what condition I would be in. Just reach out, and again, what other people think of me is none of my business, and I've learned that, and I'm okay with that today, because I'm not the big I am. I should have been dead at 34. What the doctor told me, he said, Mr. M, you keep drinking, you'll be dead at 34. My liver was hanging over my belt. I thought, he said, you're an alcoholic. I thought, whoa, doc, whoa. Let's not get carried away here. I'm not a fifth and K around the burn barrel drinking Mad Dog. Come on. And then I've come to accept and understand that I'm truly an alcoholic. I have what they call what the medical craving. I cannot stop after one. The cap was off. I was drinking, and people say, "Well, what did you drink?" That's first. Well, what did you drink? I said, "I drank anything that was too thin to chew." And he said, "Well, how often?" Yeah, here we go. Here's another one. Well, how often did you drink? Okay, any day that ended in Y. How's that?
I love that one.
Yeah, but I didn't. I mean, that's the joke and the fun, and and I joke around in AA, and it's in the program. It's serious, but I have the gift of desperation. I have it today, and I'm grateful. I am truly grateful for the things I don't have, and the things I have. And the secret of the abuse. I mean, Michael, I can't tell you how long I walked around with that. Oh, if they only knew. Then I went back to school, and that feeling came. And then I ran the drug program in Fairfax County Schools for about 8 years, working with kids. And I had worked in youth division 13 years on the police department. And the honesty of the kids, and I would see kids come to that seminar, 13 years old, that needed medical detox. 13. And I'm thinking, God, if I could only give you the message, and I just present the message. I present it as honest, open as I can. If you want it, fine. If not, then they'll gladly fund your misery. And Michael, thank you again for asking me, because last week there was a very dear friend of mine who I had tried to help years ago. They found him dead in his apartment, retired in Myrtle Beach. Drank himself to death. And, this disease kills. And, the old Irish joke is I'm from an Irish Catholic family in Philly, right? So my grandmother would go down to the funeral home, and Mr. Brown, she'd come back. She had a thick robe, and she said, "Oh my God, he looks so good. Johnny looks so good." And Mrs. Brown would say to him, "He drank a little too much of the poison." And the old joke would be, "Well, did he go to AA?" She said, "No, he wasn't that bad." I mean, how bad is that bad? Have you had enough? I didn't quit. I surrendered, and I'm surrendering today. And I just hope that if you're listening out there to Michael's podcast, and you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you'll quit tomorrow, and the same thing is going over and over again, give it a try. What do you got to lose? What do you got to? You have a lot more to gain, and I can tell you that my life today is so enriched. And I'm not a salesman for 12-step recovery. Trust me, and I'm not a saint by any stretch of the imagination. I love life. Michael, and again, I just want to thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to share and keep it green to some people out there that might be, struggling with this. Some family members. There's Al-Anon for family members. If you think, if you think your spouse is drinking too much, she probably is. Is it Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde? Who's home tonight after the cap comes off? That was the thing with me. My ex-wife used to say, "You're okay until you drink."
Yeah.
But my denial, I had industrial strength denial. And, the acronym for denial is "don't even notice I am lying."
I love that. I've not heard that one before.
Well, I got a few, Mike. I can.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, I love it. I love sobriety. I love recovery. I love laughing. I love life. Even though with all the craziness going out there in the world today, I am participating in my own recovery, and it's what I make it.
And by the way, Jim, we're talking about it. For you and I, you and I both share the alcohol demon, but I want to emphasize that it may not be anybody that's listening here to this podcast. Your issue may not actually be drinking. It may be drugs. It may be gambling, maybe pornography, maybe eating,
maybe porn, maybe drugs, exercise, food, anything that what they call obsessive compulsive, or and I've known people, hooked on exercise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I had people, Michael, that would exercise in the closet so their spouse wouldn't see them.
Wow.
You don't think that's unmanageable, do you?
I think what it comes down to, Jim, when we talk about, and you were telling the story about how, you have a loved one looking at their spouse or family member in the casket, and they know damn well that they died from drinking, and they talk about how
Yeah.
good they look,
Yeah.
and they say, well, his drinking wasn't that bad. I've told this story before, Jim, and I'll get your thoughts on this as well. That when I worked as an EAP, employee assistance program, a peer counselor in the FBI, I would have people sent to me because I was the alcohol guy. So they would send people to me.
Me too. Yeah.
And people would say, yeah, and I know you did the same type of work. And I would have, and I think that I learned a lot of this from you, actually, Jim, in my approach. I used to lecture people a lot, and I'm sure I still do a lot of that. But I learned the questioning approach to people, and they would come into my office. They'd be sent to me, and they'd say, "Hey, Mike, my wife says I have a drinking problem," or a lot of times they were mandated, like their supervisor sent them to me, and they would say, "Hey, my supervisor over here says that I drink too much. What do you think?" And this is how I would approach it, Jim. And I got a lot of this from you. I wouldn't say, yes, I smell alcohol when you came in the office. I mean, I wouldn't even approach that. The way I would approach it is this, and this might be a good way for any listeners out there right now. I want you to think about this. I want you to ask yourself a question. Do normal social drinkers, do people that do not have a drinking problem even have these conversations with people? Exactly. If you are a normal social drinker, if you're that person that had one glass of wine last year on Christmas Eve, and in June, your wife sits you down and says, "Hey, I need to talk to you about that one glass of wine you had last year," Now that tip that I'm thinking that doesn't happen very often. If you have gotten to the point to where your wife, your husband, your significant other, or your boss or a coworker has questioned your drinking, fact is they've probably been wanting to question you about your drinking for quite a while, and it took them a while to get to that point. And so what I would ask these people when they would come into my office was, do normal social drinkers even have that conversation? I'm just asking questions here. And you have to think about that if it's questioning, or if you yourself say, I wonder if I'm drinking too much, because I used to have that conversation with myself.
Sure.
Ask yourself this: do normal social drinkers ask themselves that question? Do you agree with that sentiment, Jim?
Here's another one that used to kill me too. Have you ever heard a social drinker tell you they stopped drinking? Or gone on the wagon,
Yeah.
I've never heard a social drinker tell me they've stopped drinking or they've switched brands. Never. I've never heard anyone say that to me. Or,
right.
And they say, how many times have you quit drinking? Oh man, I quit so many. Oh my God, 1,000 times. Oh, okay. Have you ever heard a social drinker quit 1,000 times?
Mm-hmm.
Why no? Have you ever heard a social drinker forget to drink?
No. And it's true. And I would have people, and I love these people, and I know you've run into them as well. I go to a 12-step meeting, and I say 12-step meetings because I realize there's a lot. Hey, I talk about AA on this podcast, but there's a lot of other programs out there. So I'm including all the groups out there. I'm sure we all have this experience. Somebody come in. And when they come into the meeting, they say, "Hey, I'm just here to see, listen and see how, I want to hear what you people have to say, and you sit and you laugh because you're like, wait a minute, you just came to the same meeting I did. What do you mean, you people?" You've heard that before, Jim, right, Jim?
You know what I used to say, Mike? I'd go to a meeting in the basement of a Protestant church, and I'd say, well, if you're Catholic, don't worry about it because we're all here for the same reason. And if you see a neighbor here, welcome them. Oh, yeah. Well, oh my God, well, what are they going to think? They see me in an AA meeting. You get drunk and see what happens. I don't want my neighbors to find out. Harry, they probably already know. The car in the middle of the street.
And Jim, let me share with you this story. I'll tell you the first time I had been to meetings where I recognized people that I'd seen before, but I didn't know them, right? I didn't actually know them. But there was a meeting once that I went to, and this was early on. It was in the first year, I would say, of recovery. And, I walk in, and it was like on a federal holiday. At the time I was working for the federal government. So it's a federal holiday, and it's like in the middle of the week, or a weekday, I should say. And I go into this church, and it's just packed full of people. And I'd never been to this church before. And I look across, it's one of those things we're all sitting in a big circle, and I look across and I see a woman that I know, and by know, I'm like, I work with this person. And and that was that. And again, this was early on, and I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? That typical early recovery embarrassment. And,
not in your stomach.
Right. But there were a lot of people in the meeting, and I thought, well, maybe she doesn't see me. I just won't make eye. It's like, if I don't make eye contact, she doesn't see me. Well, that kind of situation. So at halftime, and for those of you who don't know what that is, a lot of meetings, about 30 minutes in, hour-long meeting, you'll take a little bit of a break and you can get up. And at this particular meeting, they had coffee and donuts, cookies, things like that. So I go to the kitchen. It's in a church. And I go over to get a cup of coffee, and I feel this tap on my shoulder, and I turn around and it's her. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh.
Oh, busted.
But here's what she says. Okay. And I want you guys to think about this, because it goes in line with what Jim is saying. This woman says to me, hey, Mike, listen, one of the things that is important here in this particular group is we have this thing known as the spiritual tradition of anonymity, meaning, you can't go talk about the fact that you saw me here at this meeting. So she's saying this to me. And at that point, I was looking at her and I got a bit offended, because I'm thinking, wait a minute. Okay, so let me get this straight. You're afraid that I'm going to go to work and tell people that I saw you at this meeting. And then I finally said that to her when she was done talking to me. I said, is that your concern? She said, yes. You really should not, you can't go to work and talk about the fact that you saw me here. And again, I was a bit offended. And then I looked, and I had enough, it was early recovery, but I had enough recovery behind me to know the traditions and know how this whole recovery thing worked. And I looked at her and I said, let me, again, I'm back to the questioning part. I said, let me ask you a question. Do you think that here on this federal holiday, I was like going to the Walmart, and instead of taking a right, I took a left, and by accident, I ended up at this church in this meeting with you? Do you think it was some sort of an accident? And I just sat here for the last 30 minutes knowing that I'm in, some sort of a meeting, and really I was looking for the gardening department at Walmart. Do you think that's what happened here? And she looked at me and she's like, no. And I said, then maybe you and I are here for the same reason. And furthermore, if I was to go to work tomorrow and go around the office and say, hey, guess who I saw at an AA meeting? Don't you think the first question out of their mouth would be, oh, but what were you doing there at the meeting? I mean, just think that through for a minute. And then she looked at me, and she goes, okay, I see your point. I said, now, do you hear how ridiculous what you're saying is? Lady, I'm here, and it goes to your point, Jim. We're all here for the same reason. And I thank God that you're here. I'm happy that you're here. And I'm just so happy that you're getting well, because if your life was as crappy as mine was at the end, and you're getting better the way I'm getting better, I'm happy for you. And I am the last person you need to worry about. And oh, by the way, there's nothing to worry about, because the best thing I ever did in my life was get into recovery. Okay? That's the best thing. And I would want everyone, this is nothing to be ashamed of, nothing at all. And if you're out there listening right now, you look at this as something that to be ashamed of. And what I'm saying to you is that if you make the decision to get recovery and make that commitment that Jim is, and I don't mean just participate, but commit to recovery and get well, then that will be, I don't care who you are, how much money you've made, you could be an Olympic gold medal athlete. It doesn't matter. You trust me. This is the best decision and the greatest accomplishment you've ever made in your life. You can trust me on that one. And so I thought that was just kind of an interesting exchange. And I've never worried, Jim, I can tell you, I have honestly not even thought about running into somebody that I know, because today I don't care. I just know that my life is so much better. You.
Yeah, I shake hands. I have seen people, I've been to meetings almost all over the world, and I sat in meetings with people that you would never ever think that are truly, truly anonymous, and I respect their anonymity. And we've talked, and it's like, we have the, when the co-founders of AA started, they talked about when two alcoholics meet and share, it's the language of the heart. I have experienced that. I have experienced that in the street, in the shopping center. There's eye contact. we have a language. We have a language of the heart. When I've been out in places getting change, and they see my recovery chip. Oh, you're a friend of Bill W. It starts. That's all it takes.
Mm-hmm.
And the
That's
door's
right.
open.
That's right.
And
Absolutely.
I have had that happen so many times, Mike. It's unbelievable. Well, how much time and where do you go and yada yada yada. I mean, it's like we've met 10 years before and we're continuing the same conversation. Mm-hmm. That is what I love. Chapter 2. We are people who normally would not mix.
Yeah. And I tell you what, Jim, that's what I love about you is that you clearly have read this stuff and committed yourself so much to this program that you know that where the page numbers, the chapters. Early on, I don't do this as much as I used to, although I'm going to get back into the habit of this. I used to take a notebook with me, and I realized early on.
I remember. Yeah.
You remember me with my notebook, and I have
remember
those notebooks because I used to have people ask me why I had a notebook, and I'll tell you why. And I'll tell you why I had a notebook, because I would hear things in meetings, and I learned early on that I was hearing tremendous wisdom from people, sometimes homeless people, I mean, things that you can't pay. You can't go to Harvard and hear some of the wisdom that these people were putting out. And I thought, you know what? This is so good. I need to write that statement. And a lot of it was just one-liners. It would just be like a one-line quip. And I didn't want to forget it. Yeah. And some of those were golden. And you touched on something earlier, Jim. You just reminded me of this. You talked about how you were you got to 20 years and your sponsor had died, and then you went back and got another sponsor and treated it like you were brand new. One of the things that I have noticed in my own journey is that where you get to my point, and I'm certainly I'm sure the point that you're at now as well too, is kind of maintaining that excitement. Because when you get into that first year, you pick up your first 30-day chip, your first 1-year chip, and it's exciting because it's all new. Everything's new. Well, as the years progress, it's really hard to maintain that momentum of excitement. And I kind of feel like that's where I'm not at now. And I've thought about it particularly as we get into a new year, with it being we're in, today's January 9th of 2021. So we're in that new year. And I think that one of my goals for this year is to go back and almost treat this like it was year one, and go back and reread the material and renew the commitment and the number of meetings and all the things I did in that first year, just to kind of rekindle the excitement.
Yes.
Because I really like, 20 years to go back and actually treat it like it was year one, I think takes a lot of courage to do.
I had to recommit myself, because you get past a certain time and you say, well, I got this and that's what the old timers would caution you about. You're going to get, there's going to come a time when you're going to say, do I need to go to all these meetings? Do I need, and usually anybody that I've ever heard that have drank after a period of recovery, stop going to meetings, stop, reaching out, stop making the contacts. And then all of a sudden, maybe I really wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. I've seen that. I have seen that. That's
how a relapse starts. It doesn't, people you don't just drive down the highway and go, oh, look, a 7-Eleven, and your car makes a decision on its own to pull into the parking lot of a 7-Eleven and you go in and get a beer. That's not how it works. The relapse actually starts early long with before. That seed and that plant, and maybe I don't need to go a meeting tonight. Maybe I don't need to reach out. Maybe I don't need to call my sponsor. And then it just happens more and more and more often, and then you kind of get to the point to where you're not doing anything. But it's a process.
I'll tell you another thing that happens too, Michael, that I've seen is they start drinking the non-alcoholic beer. Well, the old timers told me non-alcoholic beer is for non-alcoholics. Yeah. Or they start with the Robitussin, the NyQuil. I have a gorilla inside of me. My body doesn't know if it's sniffing, smoking, chewing, snorting, or sipping. It likes that feeling, man, to say, oh, wow, I like this. That's me. I have craving. So for me, it's total abstinence.
Yep. Oh, I absolutely agree with that. wholeheartedly. And that was something I heard early on, hey, you can get wine that doesn't have alcohol in it. Oh, they have non-alcoholic beer. They have all these different things.
I love that one.
And I don't know about you, but and people will say to you, well, why can't you have that? Why can't you have that? Well, Mike's philosophy, and it's just my philosophy, is this, that you got to remember your mind is alcoholism or addiction in general, it's a disease of the mind and the body. Now listen to that. Mind and the body. It's both. So what happens is it's the disease that tells you don't have it. And your mind can get little triggers. Then if you go and you give into that, like for example, let's say you go out and you drink a little bit of alcohol. We know that Jim, you talked about a genetic predisposition. You drink alcohol and then it starts this cycle that, listen to me closely, non-alcoholics don't have that genetic predisposition. They don't have the same, alcohol does not have the same effect on them that it does on you. And you start this cascading effect physiologically in your body that then goes and creates a craving in your mind, again, that non-alcoholics don't have. And it's the cycle. And then your body becomes dependent on it. So your mind tells you it's okay. Your mind says it's good. And then your body and mind start working together and work against you. So the way that you do it is to just get it. That's why complete abstinence is what you have to do. Now, when you drink non-alcoholic beer, or you drink non-alcoholic wine, what happens is it then, remember, you've created this neurologic pathway where your brain likes this. And so when I drink something that tastes like beer or wine, and my brain says, oh, I remember that, and I remember liking that, and then you think, okay, well, that's good. But then your body then will start craving the alcohol, and it goes back and forth. But it started with that trigger in the brain. That's where it's sent. All of our relapses start in the brain. And so the best thing to do is just, why play with it? There's a lot of things you can drink out there, a lot of stuff. Why do you have to play with fire? Again, don't do it. So I tell people, and I know you do as well, Jim, stay the hell away from it. There's a lot of things in that cooler that you can drink. You don't need alcohol, non-alcohol. What that means is you are still not thoroughly convinced that you are an alcoholic. Because I know this, that my journey got so bad, there's no way I would even go near that demon, near it. And I think that when you go to non-alcoholic beer, you're starting to play with that demon again. And that's a really bad thing to do.
That means, people say, well, the analogy that I use is anybody who's ever stopped smoking for a period of time and go back to smoking cigarettes, within a day or two, they're right back to 2 packs or whatever they were smoking. Yeah. It's the same thing with alcoholism, for me anyway. And then you'll find that people will maybe start eating the Valium or Librium or something like that. And, it's the same track team, different color sneakers. And what happens is there's no stink, there's no smell. The same thing happens, only, you're loaded. And what will happen, that'll eventually lead back to alcohol. That's what I
That's right.
Professionally.
And like you said, it's alcoholism. And by the way, I think I heard this from you once before. It's alcoholism, not wasm.
Alcoholism.
It's a current thing. Yeah. Hey, Jim, any last words of wisdom you want to leave listeners with before we go?
What I'd like to say to anyone's listening, if you're thinking about it, if you're, maybe you want to give it a try, give yourself 30 days without drinking, or if it's drugs, please don't stop drugs without checking with your doctor. And, get honest with your doc. The doc always asked me when I was on the police department, oh, how many drinks do you have? Well, doc, 2 drinks. And he never asked me what size, so, give it an honest, it's like cheating solitaire. Who knows? And that's what I equate this disease to. How about 2 drinks? That's all. It's not like that. Just be honest with yourself. Look in the mirror and say, maybe I do have a drinking problem. Ask the people around you. Ask your family members if they're sitting there. So do you think I drink too much? And when the eyes roll back and the wife almost faints or the husband says, well, I got to clear his throat, probably a good chance you do.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. And Jim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Mike, thank you. Thank you so much. Alrighty. Bye-bye.
Wow. So as we always like to say, we don't represent any group here. We've been talking about different groups, but we don't represent any groups. So, our only purpose in giving this information is to share with you what we've done, and because it's helped us, and maybe it's going to help you too. So if myself or Jim have said anything that you do not agree with or it doesn't apply to you, then just go ahead and discard it, but try to take something from us today that may be helpful to you. So that's what we do in recovery. We try to help ourselves along the way, and we help to impart that knowledge, or the knowledge that we've gained, onto others as well. So with that, please, again, visit our Facebook page, Recovery is Possible, and our website, which is VanMeterWellnessSolutions.com, VanMeterWellnessSolutions.com. Let me know how I'm doing. Let me know how, if there's a topic that you'd like to talk about, or if you're interested in. I'd love to hear from you. Take care, and we will see you next time. And Jim, thanks for joining the show today. So with that, take care, guys. See you next time.